Hello and welcome. Tonight, we step gently into one of the most enchanting fairy tales ever told. There's nothing you need to do right now. Just settle in, breathe a little slower, and let the day drift away. If this space brings you comfort, you're always welcome to stay by liking the video or subscribing, but only if it truly feels right to you. I love knowing where these stories travel, so if you wish, leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time the night has reached for you. Now lower the lights, let a soft sound fill the room, and allow yourself to be carried slowly, calmly into tonight's story. Snow White. It was the middle of winter, and the snowflakes were falling like feathers from the sky, and a queen sat at her window working, and her embroidery frame was of ebony. And as she worked, gazing at times out on the snow, she pricked her finger, and there fell from it 3 drops of blood on the snow. And when she saw how bright and red it looked, she said to herself, "Oh, that I had a child as white as snow, as red as blood, and as black as the wood of the embroidery frame." Not very long after, she had a daughter with a skin as white as snow, lips as red as blood, and hair as black as ebony, and she was named Snow White. And when she was born, the queen died. After a year had gone by, the king took another wife, a beautiful woman, but proud and overbearing, and she could not bear to be surpassed in beauty by anyone. She had a magic looking glass, and she used to stand before it and look in it and say, "Looking glass upon the wall, who is fairest of us all?" And the looking glass would answer, "You are fairest of them all." And she was contented, for she knew that the looking glass spoke the truth. Now Snow White was growing prettier and prettier, and when she was 7 years old, she was as beautiful as day, far more so than the queen herself. So one day when the queen went to her mirror and said, "Looking glass upon the wall, who is fairest of us all?" it answered, "Queen, you are full fair, 'tis true, but Snow White fairer is than you." This gave the queen a great shock, and she became yellow and green with envy. And from that hour, her heart turned against Snow White, and she hated her. And envy and pride, like ill weeds, grew in her heart higher every day, until she had no peace day or night. At last she sent for a huntsman and said, "Take the child out into the woods, so that I may set eyes on her no more. You must put her to death and bring me her heart for a token." The huntsman consented and led her away. But when he drew his cutlass to pierce Snow White's innocent heart, she began to weep and to say, "Oh, dear huntsman, do not take my life. I will go away into the wild wood and never come home again." And as she was so lovely, the huntsman had pity on her and said, "Away with you then, poor child," for he thought the wild animals would be sure to devour her, and it was as if a stone had been rolled away from his heart when he spared to put her to death. Just at that moment, a young wild boar came running by. So he caught and killed it, and taking out its heart, he brought it to the queen for a token. And it was salted and cooked, and the wicked woman ate it up, thinking that there was an end of Snow White. Now when the poor child found herself quite alone in the wild woods, she felt full of terror, even of the very leaves on the trees, and she did not know what to do for fright. Then she began to run over the sharp stones and through the thorn bushes and the wild beasts after her, but they did her no harm. She ran as long as her feet would carry her, and when the evening drew near, she came to a little house, and she went inside to rest. Everything there was very small, but as pretty and clean as possible. There stood the little table, ready laid and covered with a white cloth, and 7 little plates and 7 knives and forks and drinking cups. By the wall stood 7 little beds, side by side, covered with clean white quilts. Snow White, being very hungry and thirsty, ate from each plate a little porridge and bread, and drank out of each little cup a drop of wine, so as not to finish up one portion alone. After that she felt so tired that she lay down on one of the beds, but it did not seem to suit her. One was too long, another too short, but at last the 7th was quite right. And so she lay down upon it, committed herself to heaven, and fell asleep. When it was quite dark, the masters of the house came home. They were 7 dwarfs whose occupation was to dig underground among the mountains. When they had lighted their 7 candles, and it was quite light in the little house, they saw that someone must have been in, as everything was not in the same order in which they left it. The first said, "Who has been sitting in my little chair?" The second said, "Who has been eating from my little plate?" The third said, "Who has been taking my little loaf?" The fourth said, "Who has been tasting my porridge?" The fifth said, "Who has been using my little fork?" The sixth said, "Who has been cutting with my little knife?" The seventh said, "Who has been drinking from my little cup?" Then the first one, looking round, saw a hollow in his bed and cried, "Who has been lying on my bed?" And the others came running and cried, "Someone has been on our beds too." But when the 7th looked at his bed, he saw little Snow White lying there asleep. Then he told the others, who came running up, crying out in their astonishment, and holding up their 7 little candles to throw a light upon Snow White. "Oh goodness, oh gracious!" cried they, "what beautiful child is this?" And were so full of joy to see her that they did not wake her, but let her sleep on. And the 7th dwarf slept with his comrades an hour at a time with each until the night had passed. When it was morning, and Snow White awoke and saw the 7 dwarfs, she was very frightened, but they seemed quite friendly, and asked her what her name was, and she told them. And then they asked how she came to be in their house, and she related to them how her stepmother had wished her to be put to death, and how the huntsman had spared her life, and how she had run the whole day long, until at last she had found their little house. Then the dwarf said, "If you will keep our house for us, and cook and wash and make the beds and sew and knit and keep everything tidy and clean, you may stay with us, and you shall lack nothing." "With all my heart," said Snow White, and so she stayed and kept the house in good order. In the morning, the dwarfs went to the mountain to dig for gold. In the evening, they came home, and their supper had to be ready for them. All the day long the maiden was left alone, and the good little dwarfs warned her, saying, "Beware of your stepmother. She will soon know you are here. Let no one into the house." Now the queen, having eaten Snow White's heart as she supposed, felt quite sure that now she was the first and fairest, and so she came to her mirror and said, "Looking glass upon the wall, who is fairest of us all?" And the glass answered, "Queen, thou art of beauty rare, but Snow White, living in the glen with the 7 little men, is 1,000 times more fair." Then she was very angry, for the glass always spoke the truth, and she knew that the huntsman must have deceived her, and that Snow White must still be living. And she thought and thought how she could manage to make an end of her, for as long as she was not the fairest in the land, envy left her no rest. At last, she thought of a plan. She painted her face and dressed herself like an old peddler woman so that no one would have known her. In this disguise, she went across the 7 mountains until she came to the house of the 7 little dwarfs, and she knocked at the door and cried, "Fine wares to sell, fine wares to sell." Snow White peeped out of the window and cried, "Good day, good woman, what have you to sell?" "Good wares, fine wares," answered she, "laces of all colors," and she held up a piece that was woven of variegated silk. "I need not be afraid of letting in this good woman," thought Snow White, and she unbarred the door and bought the pretty lace. "What a figure you are, child," said the old woman. "Come and let me lace you properly for once." Snow White, suspecting nothing, stood up before her and let her lace her with the new lace. But the old woman laced so quick and tight that it took Snow White's breath away, and she fell down as dead. "Now you have done with being the fairest," said the old woman as she hastened away. Not long after that, towards evening, the 7 dwarfs came home and were terrified to see their dear Snow White lying on the ground without life or motion. They raised her up, and when they saw how tightly she was laced, they cut the lace in 2. Then she began to draw breath, and little by little she returned to life. When the dwarfs heard what had happened, they said, "The old peddler woman was no other than the wicked queen. You must beware of letting anyone in when we are not here." And when the wicked woman got home, she went to her glass and said, "Looking glass against the wall, who is fairest of us all?" And it answered as before, "Queen, thou art of beauty rare, but Snow White living in the glen with the 7 little men is 1,000 times more fair." When she heard that, she was so struck with surprise that all the blood left her heart, for she knew that Snow White must still be living. "But now," said she, "I will think of something that will be her ruin." And by witchcraft she made a poisoned comb. Then she dressed herself up to look like another different sort of old woman. So she went across the 7 mountains and came to the house of the 7 dwarfs, and knocked at the door and cried, "Good wares to sell, good wares to sell." Snow White looked out and said, "Go away, I must not let anybody in." "But you are not forbidden to look," said the old woman, taking out the poisoned comb and holding it up. It pleased the poor child so much that she was tempted to open the door. And when the bargain was made, the old woman said, "Now for once your hair shall be properly combed." Poor Snow White, thinking no harm, let the old woman do as she would, but no sooner was the comb put in her hair than the poison began to work, and the poor girl fell down senseless. "Now, you paragon of beauty," said the wicked woman, "this is the end of you," and went off. By good luck, it was now near evening, and the 7 little dwarfs came home. When they saw Snow White lying on the ground as dead, they thought directly that it was the stepmother's doing, and looked about, found the poisoned comb, and no sooner had they drawn it out of her hair than Snow White came to herself and related all that had passed. Then they warned her once more to be on her guard, and never again to let anyone in at the door. And the queen went home, and stood before the looking-glass, and said, "Looking glass against the wall, who is fairest of us all?" And the looking-glass answered as before, "Queen, thou art of beauty rare, but Snow White living in the glen with the 7 little men is 1,000 times more fair." When she heard the looking-glass speak thus, She trembled and shook with anger. "Snow White shall die," cried she, "though it should cost me my own life." And then she went to a secret, lonely chamber where no one was likely to come, and there she made a poisonous apple. It was beautiful to look upon, being white with red cheeks, so that anyone who should see it must long for it, but whoever ate even a little bit of it must die. When the apple was ready, she painted her face and clothed herself like a peasant woman, and went across the 7 mountains to where the 7 dwarfs lived. And when she knocked at the door, Snow White put her head out of the window and said, "I dare not let anybody in. The 7 dwarfs told me not." "All right," answered the woman. "I can easily get rid of my apples elsewhere. There I will give you one." "No," answered Snow White, "I dare not take anything." "Are you afraid of poison?" said the woman. "Look here, I will cut the apple in 2 pieces. You shall have the red side, I will have the white one." For the apple was so cunningly made that all the poison was in the rosy half of it. Snow White longed for the beautiful apple, and as she saw the peasant woman eating a piece of it, she could no longer refrain, but stretched out her hand and took the poisoned half. But no sooner had she taken a morsel of it into her mouth than she fell to the earth as dead. And the queen, casting on her a terrible glance, laughed aloud and cried, "As white as snow, as red as blood, as black as ebony this time, the dwarfs will not be able to bring you to life again." And when she went home and asked the looking glass, "Looking glass against the wall, who is fairest of us all?" "At last," it answered, "you are the fairest now of all." Then her envious heart had peace, as much as an envious heart can have. The dwarfs, when they came home in the evening, found Snow White lying on the ground, and there came no breath out of her mouth, and she was dead. They lifted her up, sought if anything poisonous was to be found cut. Her laces combed her hair, washed her with water and wine, but all was of no avail. The poor child was dead and remained dead. Then they laid her on a bier and sat all 7 of them round it and wept and lamented 3 whole days. And then they would have buried her, but that she looked still as if she were living with her beautiful blooming cheeks. So they said, "We cannot hide her away in the black ground." And they had made a coffin of clear glass so as to be looked into from all sides, and they laid her in it and wrote in golden letters upon it her name, and that she was a king's daughter. Then they set the coffin out upon the mountain, and one of them always remained by it to watch. And the birds came too, and mourned for Snow White, first an owl, then a raven, and lastly a dove. Now for a long while Snow White lay in the coffin, and never changed, but looked as if she were asleep, for she was still as white as snow, as red as blood, and her hair was as black as ebony. It happened, however, that one day a king's son rode through the wood and up to the dwarf's house, which was near it. He saw on the mountain the coffin and beautiful Snow White within it, and he read what was written in golden letters upon it. Then he said to the dwarfs, "Let me have the coffin, and I will give you whatever you like to ask for it." But the dwarfs told him that they could not part with it for all the gold in the world. But he said, "I beseech you to give it me, for I cannot live without looking upon Snow White. If you consent, I will bring you to great honor and care for you, as if you were my brethren." When he so spoke, the good little dwarfs had pity upon him, and gave him the coffin, and the king's son called his servants, and bid them carry it away on their shoulders. Now it happened that as they were going along, they stumbled over a bush, and with the shaking, the bit of poisoned apple flew out of her throat. It was not long before she opened her eyes, threw up the cover of the coffin, and sat up, alive and well. "Oh dear, where am I?" cried she. The king's son answered full of joy, "You are near me," and relating all that had happened, he said, "I would rather have you than anything in the world. Come with me to my father's castle, and you shall be my bride." And Snow White was kind and went with him, and their wedding was held with pomp and great splendor. But Snow White's wicked stepmother was also bidden to the feast, and when she had dressed herself in beautiful clothes, she went to her looking-glass and said, "Looking-glass upon the wall, who is fairest of us all?" The looking-glass answered, "O Queen, although you are of beauty rare, the young bride is 1,000 times more fair." Then she railed and cursed, and was beside herself with disappointment and anger. First, she thought she would not go to the wedding, but then she felt she should have no peace until she went and saw the bride. And when she saw her, she knew her for Snow White, and could not stir from the place for anger and terror, for they had ready red-hot iron shoes in which she had to dance until she fell down dead. The Crumbs on the Table. A countryman one day said to his little puppies, "Come into the parlor and enjoy yourselves, and pick up the breadcrumbs on the table. Your mistress has gone out to pay some visits." Then the little dog said, "No, no, we will not go. If the mistress gets to know it, she will beat us." The countryman said, "She will know nothing about it. Do come. After all, she never gives you anything good." Then the little dogs again said, "Nay, nay, we must let it alone. We must not go." But the countryman let them have no peace, until at last they went and got on the table and ate up the breadcrumbs with all their might. But at that very moment the mistress came and seized the stick in great haste and beat them and treated them very hardly. And when they were outside the house, the little dogs said to the countryman, "Dost thou see?" Then the countryman laughed and said, Didn't you expect it?" So they just had to run away. The Golden Bird. In times gone by, there was a king who had at the back of his castle a beautiful pleasure garden in which stood a tree that bore golden apples. As the apples ripened, they were counted, but one morning one was missing. Then the king was angry, and he ordered that watch should be kept about the tree every night. Now the king had 3 sons, and he sent the eldest to spend the whole night in the garden. So he watched till midnight, and then he could keep off sleep no longer, and in the morning another apple was missing. The second son had to watch the following night, but it fared no better, for when 12 o'clock had struck, he went to sleep, and in the morning another apple was missing. Now came the turn of the third son to watch, and he was ready to do so, but the king had less trust in him and believed he would acquit himself still worse than his brothers, but in the end he consented to let him try. So the young man lay down under the tree to watch, and resolved that sleep should not be master. When it struck 12, something came rushing through the air, and he saw in the moonlight a bird flying towards him, whose feathers glittered like gold. The bird perched upon the tree and had already pecked off an apple when the young man let fly an arrow at it. The bird flew away, but the arrow had struck its plumage, and one of its golden feathers fell to the ground. The young man picked it up and taking it next morning to the king, told him what had happened in the night. The king called his council together, and all declared that such a feather was worth more than the whole kingdom. "Since the feather is so valuable," said the king, "one is not enough for me. I must and will have the whole bird." So the eldest son set off, and relying on his own cleverness, he thought he should soon find the golden bird. When he had gone some distance, he saw a fox sitting at the edge of a wood, and he pointed his gun at him. The fox cried out, "Do not shoot me, and I will give you good counsel. You are on your way to find the golden bird, and this evening you will come to a village in which 2 taverns stand facing each other. One will be brightly lighted up, and there will be plenty of merriment going on inside. Do not mind about that, but go into the other one, although it will look to you very uninviting. How can a silly beast give one any rational advice?" thought the king's son, and let fly at the fox, but missed him, and he stretched out his tail and ran quick into the wood. Then the young man went on his way, and towards evening he came to the village, and there stood the 2 taverns. In one singing and dancing was going on, the other looked quite dull and wretched. "I should be a fool," said he, "to go into that dismal place while there is anything so good close by." So he went into the merry inn, and there lived in clover, quite forgetting the bird and his father and all good counsel. As time went on, and the eldest son never came home, the second son set out to seek the golden bird. He met with the fox, just as the eldest did, and received good advice from him without attending to it. And when he came to the 2 taverns, his brother was standing and calling to him at the window of one of them, out of which came sounds of merriment. So he could not resist, but went in and reveled to his heart's content. And then as time went on, the youngest son wished to go forth and to try his luck, but his father would not consent. "It would be useless," said he. "He is much less likely to find the bird than his brothers, and if any misfortune were to happen to him, he would not know how to help himself. His wits are none of the best." But at last, as there was no peace to be had, he let him go. By the side of the wood sat the fox, begged him to spare his life, and gave him good counsel. The young man was kind, and said, "Be easy, little fox, I will do you no harm." "You shall not repent of it," answered the fox, "and that you may get there all the sooner, get up and sit on my tail." And no sooner had he done so than the fox began to run, and off they went over stock and stone, so that the wind whistled in their hair. When they reached the village, the young man got down, and following the fox's advice, went into the mean-looking tavern without hesitating, and there he passed a quiet night. The next morning, when he went out into the field, the fox, who was sitting there already, said, "I will tell you further what you have to do. Go straight on until you come to a castle before which a great band of soldiers lie, but do not trouble yourself about them, for they will be all asleep and snoring. Pass through them and forward into the castle, and go through all the rooms until you come to one where there is a golden bird hanging in a wooden cage. Near at hand will stand empty a golden cage of state, but you must beware of taking the bird out of his ugly cage and putting him into the fine one. If you do so, you will come to harm." After he had finished saying this, the fox stretched out his tail again, and the king's son sat him down upon it. Then away they went over stock and stone, so that the wind whistled through their hair. And when the king's son reached the castle, he found everything as the fox had said, and he at last entered the room where the golden bird was hanging in a wooden cage while a golden one was standing by. The 3 golden apples, too, were in the room. Then, thinking it foolish to let the beautiful bird stay in that mean and ugly cage, he opened the door of it, took hold of it, and put it in the golden one. In the same moment, the bird uttered a piercing cry. The soldiers, awaked, rushed in, seized the king's son, and put him in prison. The next morning, he was brought before a judge, and as he confessed everything, condemned to death. But the king said he would spare his life on one condition, that he should bring him the golden horse, whose paces were swifter than the wind, and that then he should also receive the golden bird as a reward. So the king's son set off to find the golden horse, but he sighed and was very sad, for how should it be accomplished? And then he saw his old friend the fox sitting by the roadside. "Now you see," said the fox, "ail this has happened, because you would not listen to me. But be of good courage, I will bring you through, and will tell you how you are to get the golden horse. You must go straight on until you come to a castle, where the horse stands in his stable. Before the stable door, the grooms will be lying, but they will all be asleep and snoring, and you can go and quietly lead out the horse. But one thing you must mind, take care to put upon him the plain saddle of wood and leather, and not the golden one which will hang close by. Otherwise, it will go badly with you." Then the fox stretched out his tail, and the king's son seated himself upon it, and away they went over stock and stone until the wind whistled through their hair. And everything happened just as the fox had said. And he came to the stall where the golden horse was, and as he was about to put on him the plain saddle, he thought to himself, "Such a beautiful animal would be disgraced were I not to put on him the good saddle which becomes him so well." However, no sooner did the horse feel the golden saddle touch him than he began to neigh. And the grooms all awoke, seized the king's son, and threw him into prison. The next morning he was delivered up to justice and condemned to death, but the king promised him his life, and also to bestow upon him the golden horse, if he could convey thither the beautiful princess of the golden castle. With a heavy heart, the king's son set out, but by great good luck he soon met with the faithful fox. "I ought now to leave you to your own ill luck," said the fox, "but I am sorry for you, and will once more help you in your need. Your way lies straight up to the golden castle. You will arrive there in the evening, and at night, when all is quiet, the beautiful princess goes to the bath. And as she is entering the bathing house, go up to her and give her a kiss. Then she will follow you, and you can lead her away. But do not suffer her first to go and take leave of her parents, or it will go ill with you." Then the fox stretched out his tail. The king's son seated himself upon it, and away they went over stock and stone, so that the wind whistled through their hair. And when he came to the golden castle, all was as the fox had said. He waited until midnight, when all lay in deep sleep, and then as the beautiful princess went to the bathing house, he went up to her and gave her a kiss, and she willingly promised to go with him. But she begged him earnestly and with tears that he would let her first go and take leave of her parents. At first he denied her prayer, but as she wept so much the more, and fell at his feet, he gave in at last. And no sooner had the princess reached her father's bedside than he and all who were in the castle waked up, and the young man was seized and thrown into prison. The next morning the king said to him, "Thy life is forfeit, but thou shalt find grace if thou canst level that mountain that lies before my windows and over which I am not able to see. And if this is done within 8 days, thou shalt have my daughter for a reward." So the king's son set to work and dug and shoveled away without ceasing. But when on the 7th day he saw how little he had accomplished, and that all his work was as nothing, he fell into great sadness and gave up all hope. But on the evening of the 7th day the fox appeared and said, "You do not deserve that I should help you, but go now and lie down to sleep, and I will do the work for you." The next morning when he awoke and looked out of the window, the mountain had disappeared. The young man hastened full of joy to the king and told him that his behest was fulfilled, and whether the king liked it or not, he had to keep to his word and let his daughter go. So they both went away together, and it was not long before the faithful fox came up to them. "Well, you have got the best first," said he, "but you must know the golden horse belongs to the princess of the golden castle." "But how shall I get it?" asked the young man. "I am going to tell you," answered the fox. "First go to the king who sent you to the golden castle and take to him the beautiful princess. There will then be very great rejoicing. He will willingly give you the golden horse, and they will lead him out to you. Then mount him without delay and stretch out your hand to each of them to take leave, and last of all to the princess. And when you have her by the hand, swing her up on the horse behind you and off you go. Nobody will be able to overtake you, for that horse goes swifter than the wind." And so it was all happily done, and the king's son carried off the beautiful princess on the golden horse. The fox did not stay behind, and he said to the young man, "Now I will help you to get the golden bird. When you draw near the castle where the bird is, let the lady alight, and I will take her under my care. Then you must ride the golden horse into the castle yard, and there will be great rejoicing to see it, and they will bring out to you the golden bird. As soon as you have the cage in your hand, you must start off back to us, and then you shall carry the lady away." The plan was successfully carried out. And when the young man returned with the treasure, the fox said, "Now what will you give me for my reward?" "What would you like?" asked the young man. "When we are passing through the wood, I desire that you should slay me and cut my head and feet off. That were a strange sign of gratitude," said the king's son, "and I could not possibly do such a thing." Then said the fox, "If you will not do it, I must leave you, but before I go, let me give you some good advice. Beware of 2 things: buy no gallows meat, and sit at no brookside." With that, the fox ran off into the wood. The young man thought to himself, "That is a wonderful animal with most singular ideas. How should anyone buy gallows meat? And I am sure I have no particular fancy for sitting by a brookside." So he rode on with the beautiful princess, and their way led them through the village where his 2 brothers had stayed. There they heard great outcry and noise, and when he asked what it was all about, they told him that 2 people were going to be hanged. And when he drew near, he saw that it was his 2 brothers who had done all sorts of evil tricks and had wasted all their goods. He asked if there were no means of setting them free. "Oh, yes, if you will buy them off," answered the people. "But why should you spend your money in redeeming such worthless men?" But he persisted in doing so, and when they were let go, they all went on their journey together. After a while they came to the wood where the fox had met them first, and there it seemed so cool and sheltered from the sun's burning rays that the 2 brothers said, Let us rest here for a little by the brook and eat and drink to refresh ourselves." The young man consented, quite forgetting the fox's warning, and he seated himself by the brookside, suspecting no evil. But the two brothers thrust him backwards into the brook, seized the princess, the horse, and the bird, and went home to their father. "Is not this the golden bird that we bring?" said they. "And we have also the golden horse and the princess of the golden castle." Then there was great rejoicing in the royal castle, but the horse did not feed, the bird did not chirp, and the princess sat still and wept. The youngest brother, however, had not perished. The brook was by good fortune dry, and he fell on soft moss without receiving any hurt, but he could not get up again. But in his need, the faithful fox was not lacking. He came up running and reproached him for having forgotten his advice. "But I cannot forsake you all the same," said he. "I will help you back again into daylight." So he told the young man to grasp his tail and hold on to it fast, and so he drew him up again. "Still, you are not quite out of all danger," said the fox. "Your brothers, not being certain of your death, have surrounded the wood with sentinels who are to put you to death if you let yourself be seen." A poor beggar man was sitting by the path, and the young man changed clothes with him and went clad in that wise into the king's courtyard. Nobody knew him, but the bird began to chirp, and the horse began to feed, and the beautiful princess ceased weeping. "What does this mean?" said the king, astonished. The princess answered, "I cannot tell except that I was sad, and now I am joyful. It is to me as if my rightful bridegroom had returned." Then she told him all that happened, although the two brothers had threatened to put her to death if she let out anything. The king then ordered every person who was in the castle to be brought before him, and with the rest came the young man like a beggar in his wretched garments. But the princess knew him and greeted him well, falling on his neck and kissing him. The wicked brothers were seized and put to death, and the youngest brother was married to the princess and succeeded to the inheritance of his father. But what became of the poor fox long afterwards? The king's son was going through the wood, and the fox met him and said, "Now you have everything that you can wish for, but my misfortunes never come to an end, and it lies in your power to free me from them." And once more he prayed the king's son earnestly to slay him and cut off his head and feet. So at last he consented, and no sooner was it done than the fox was changed into a man, and was no other than the brother of the beautiful princess. And thus he was set free from a spell that had bound him for a long, long time. And now indeed there lacked nothing to their happiness as long as they lived. Eve's various children. When Adam and Eve were driven out of paradise, they were compelled to build a house for themselves on unfruitful ground and eat their bread in the sweat of their brow. Adam dug up the land and Eve span. Every year Eve brought a child into the world, but the children were unlike each other, some pretty and some ugly. After a considerable time had gone by, God sent an angel to them to announce that he was coming to inspect their household. Eve, delighted that the Lord should be so gracious, cleaned her house, diligently decked it with flowers, and strewed reeds on the floor. Then she brought in her children, but only the beautiful ones. She washed and bathed them, combed their hair, put clean raiment on them, and cautioned them to conduct themselves decorously and modestly in the presence of the Lord. They were to bow down before him civilly, hold out their hands and to answer his questions modestly and sensibly. The ugly children were, however, not to let themselves be seen. One hid himself beneath the hay, another under the roof, a third in the straw, the fourth in the stove, the fifth in the cellar, the sixth under a tub, the seventh beneath the wine cask, the eighth under an old fur cloak, the ninth and 10th beneath the cloth, out of which she always made their clothes, and the 11th and 12th under the leather, out of which she cut their shoes. She had scarcely got ready before there was a knock at the house door. Adam looked through a chink and saw that it was the Lord. Adam opened the door respectfully, and the Heavenly Father entered. There in a row stood the pretty children, and bowed before him, held out their hands, and knelt down. The Lord, however, began to bless them, laid his hands on the first, and said, "Thou shalt be a powerful king." And to the second, "Thou a prince." To the third, "Thou a count." To the fourth, "Thou a knight." To the fifth, "Thou a nobleman." To the sixth, "Thou a burgher." To the seventh, "Thou a merchant." To the eighth, "Thou a learned man." He bestowed upon them also all his richest blessings. When Eve saw that the Lord was so mild and gracious, she thought, "I will bring hither my ill-favored children also. It may be that he will bestow his blessing on them likewise." So she ran and brought them out of the hay, the straw, the stove, and wherever else she had concealed them. Then came the whole coarse, dirty, shabby, sooty band. The Lord smiled, looked at them all, and said, "I will bless these also." He laid his hands on the first and said to him, "Thou shalt be a peasant." To the second, "Thou a fisherman." To the third, "Thou a smith." To the fourth, "Thou a tanner." To the fifth, "Thou a weaver." To the sixth, "Thou a shoemaker." To the seventh, "Thou a tailor." To the eighth, "Thou a potter." To the ninth, "Thou a wagoner." To the 10th, "Thou a sailor." To the 11th, "Thou an errand boy." To the 12th, "Thou a scullion all the days of thy life." When Eve had heard all this, she said, "Lord, how unequally thou dividest thy gifts. After all, they are all of them my children, whom I have brought into the world. Thy favors should be given to all alike." But God answered, "Eve, thou dost not understand. It is right and necessary that the entire world should be supplied from thy children. If they were all princes and lords who would grow corn, thresh it, grind, and bake it, who would be blacksmiths, weavers, carpenters, masons, laborers, tailors, and seamstresses. Each shall have his own place, so that one shall support the other, and all shall be fed like the limbs of one body." Then Eve answered, "Ah, Lord, forgive me, I was too quick in speaking to thee. Have thy divine will with my children." The Peasant in Heaven. Once on a time, a poor pious peasant died and arrived before the gate of heaven. At the same time, a very rich lord came there who also wanted to get into heaven. Then St. Peter came with the key and opened the door and let the great man in, but apparently did not see the peasant and shut the door again. And now the peasant outside heard how the great man was received in heaven with all kinds of rejoicing, and how they were making music and singing within. At length all became quiet again, and St. Peter came and opened the gate of heaven and let the peasant in. The peasant, however, expected that they would make music and sing when he went in also, but all remained quite quiet. He was received with great affection, it is true, and the angels came to meet him, but no one sang. Then the peasant asked St. Peter how it was that they did not sing for him as they had done when the rich man went in and said that it seemed to him that there in heaven things were done with just as much partiality as on earth. Then said St. Peter, "By no means, thou art just as dear to us as anyone else, and wilt enjoy every heavenly delight that the rich man enjoys. But poor fellows like thee come to heaven every day. But a rich man like this does not come more than once in 100 years." The king's son who feared nothing. There was once a king's son who was no longer content to stay at home in his father's house. And as he had no fear of anything, he thought, "I will go forth into the wide world. There the time will not seem long to me, and I shall see wonders enough." So he took leave of his parents and went forth and on from morning till night, and whichever way his path led, it was the same to him. It came to pass that he got to the house of a giant, and as he was so tired, he sat down by the door and rested. And as he let his eyes roam here and there, he saw the giant's playthings lying in the yard. These were a couple of enormous balls and 9 pins as tall as a man. After a while, he had a fancy to set the 9 pins up, and then rolled the balls at them and screamed and cried out when the 9 pins fell, and had a merry time of it. The giant heard the noise, stretched his head out of the window, and saw a man who was not taller than other men, and yet played with his 9 pins. "Little worm," cried he, "why art thou playing with my balls? Who gave thee strength to do it?" The king's son looked up, saw the giant, and said, "O thou blockhead, thou thinkest indeed that thou only hast strong arms. I can do everything I want to do." The giant came down and watched the bowling with great admiration, and said, "Child of man, if thou art one of that kind, go and bring me an apple of the tree of life." "What dost thou want with it?" said the king's son. "I do not want the apple for myself," answered the giant, "but I have a betrothed bride who wishes for it. I have traveled far about the world and cannot find the tree." "I will soon find it," said the king's son, "and I do not know what is to prevent me from getting the apple down." The giant said, "Thou really believest it to be so easy. The garden in which the tree stands is surrounded by an iron railing, and in front of the railing lie wild beasts, each close to the other, and they keep watch and let no man go in." "They will be sure to let me in," said the king's son. "Yes, but even if thou dost get into the garden and seest the apple hanging to the tree, it is still not thine. A ring hangs in front of it, through which anyone who wants to reach the apple and break it off must put his hand, and no one has yet had the luck to do it." "That luck will be mine," said the king's son. Then he took leave of the giant and went forth over mountain and valley and through plains and forests, until at length he came to the wondrous garden. The beasts lay round about it, but they had put their heads down and were asleep. Moreover, they did not awake when he went up to them. So he stepped over them, climbed the fence, and got safely into the garden. There, in the very middle of it, stood the tree of life, and the red apples were shining upon the branches. He climbed up the trunk to the top, and as he was about to reach out for an apple, he saw a ring hanging before it. But he thrust his hand through that without any difficulty and gathered the apple. The ring closed tightly on his arm, and all at once he felt a prodigious strength flowing through his veins. When he had come down again from the tree with the apple, he would not climb over the fence, but grasped the great gate and had no need to shake it more than once before it sprang open with a loud crash. Then he went out, and the lion, which had been lying down before, was awake and sprang after him, not in rage and fierceness, but following him humbly as its master. The king's son took the giant the apple he had promised him and said, "Seest thou, I have brought it without difficulty." The giant was glad that his desire had been so soon satisfied, hastened to his bride, and gave her the apple for which she had wished. She was a beautiful and wise maiden, and as she did not see the ring on his arm, she said, "I shall never believe that thou hast brought the apple until I see the ring on thine arm." The giant said, "I have nothing to do but go home and fetch it," and thought it would be easy to take away by force from the weak man what he would not give of his own free will. He therefore demanded the ring from him, but the king's sons refused it. "Where the apple is, the ring must be also," said the giant. "If thou wilt not give it of thine own accord, thou must fight with me for it." They wrestled with each other for a long time, but the giant could not get the better of the king's son, who was strengthened by the magical power of the ring. Then the giant thought of a stratagem and said, "I have got warm with fighting, and so hast thou. We will bathe in the river and cool ourselves before we begin again." The king's son, who knew nothing of falsehood, went with him to the water, and pulled off with his clothes the ring also from his arm, and sprang into the river. The giant instantly snatched the ring and ran away with it, but the lion, which had observed the theft, pursued the giant, tore the ring out of his hand, and brought it back to its master. Then the giant placed himself behind an oak tree, and while the king's son was busy putting on his clothes again, surprised him and put both his eyes out. And now the unhappy king's son stood there and was blind, and knew not how to help himself. Then the giant came back to him, took him by the hand, as if he were someone who wanted to guide him, and led him to the top of a high rock. There he left him standing, and thought, "Just 2 steps more, and he will fall down and kill himself, and I can take the ring from him." But the faithful lion had not deserted its master. It held him fast by the clothes and drew him gradually back again. When the giant came and wanted to rob the dead man, he saw that his cunning had been in vain. "Is there no way then of destroying a weak child of man like that?" said he angrily to himself, and seized the king's son and led him back again to the precipice by another way. But the lion, which saw his evil design, helped its master out of danger here also. When they had got close to the edge, the giant let the blind man's hand drop, and was going to leave him behind alone, but the lion pushed the giant so that he was thrown down and fell, dashed to pieces on the ground. The faithful animal again drew its master back from the precipice and guided him to a tree by which flowed a clear brook. The king's son sat down there, but the lion lay down and sprinkled the water in his face with its paws. Scarcely had a couple of drops wetted the sockets of his eyes than he was once more able to see something, and remarked a little bird flying quite close by, which wounded itself against the trunk of a tree. On this it went down to the water and bathed itself therein, and then it soared upwards and swept between the trees without touching them, as if it had recovered its sight again. Then the king's son recognized a sign from God and stooped down to the water and washed and bathed his face in it. And when he arose, he had his eyes once more brighter and clearer than they had ever been. The king's son thanked God for his great mercy and traveled with his lion onwards through the world. And it came to pass that he arrived before a castle which was enchanted. In the gateway stood a maiden of beautiful form and fine face, but she was quite black. She spoke to him and said, "Ah, if thou couldst but deliver me from the evil spell which is thrown over me." "What shall I do?" said the king's son. The maiden answered, "Thou must pass 3 nights in the great hall of this enchanted castle, but thou must let no fear enter thy heart. When they are doing their worst to torment thee, if thou bearest it without letting a sound escape thee, I shall be free. Thy life they dare not take." Then said the king's son, "I have no fear. With God's help, I will try it." So he went gaily into the castle, and when it grew dark, he seated himself in the large hall and waited. Everything was quiet, however, till midnight, when all at once a great tumult began, and out of every hole and corner came little devils. They behaved as if they did not see him, seated themselves in the middle of the room, lighted a fire, and began to gamble. When one of them lost, he said, "It is not right. Someone is here who does not belong to us. It is his fault that I am losing." "Wait, you fellow behind the stove, I am coming," said another. The screaming became still louder, so that no one could have heard it without terror. The king's son stayed sitting quite quietly and was not afraid, but at last the devils jumped up from the ground and fell on him, and there were so many of them that he could not defend himself from them. They dragged him about on the floor, pinched him, pricked him, beat him, and tormented him, but no sound escaped from him. Towards morning they disappeared, and he was so exhausted that he could scarcely move his limbs. But when day dawned, the black maiden came to him. She bore in her hand a little bottle, wherein was the water of life, wherewith she washed him, and he at once felt all pain depart, and new strength flow through his veins. She said, "Thou hast held out successfully for 1 night, but 2 more lie before thee." Then she went away again, and as she was going, he observed that her feet had become white. The next night the devils came and began their gambols anew. They fell on the king's son and beat him much more severely than the night before, until his body was covered with wounds. But as he bore all quietly, they were forced to leave him, and when dawn appeared, the maiden came and healed him with the water of life. And when she went away, he saw with joy that she had already become white to the tips of her fingers. And now he had only 1 night more to go through, but it was the worst. The hobgoblins came again. "Art thou there still?" cried they. "Thou shalt be tormented till thy breath stops." They pricked him and beat him and threw him here and there and pulled him by the arms and legs as if they wanted to tear him to pieces, but he bore everything and never uttered a cry. At last the devils vanished, but he lay fainting there and did not stir, nor could he raise his eyes to look at the maiden who came in and sprinkled and bathed him with the water of life. But suddenly he was freed from all pain and felt fresh and healthy as if he had awakened from sleep. And when he opened his eyes, he saw the maiden standing by him, snow white and fair as day. "Rise," said she, "and swing thy sword 3 times over the stairs, and then all will be delivered." And when he had done that, the whole castle was released from enchantment, and the maiden was a rich king's daughter. The servants came and said that the table was already set in the great hall and dinner served up. Then they sat down and ate and drank together, and in the evening the wedding was solemnized with great rejoicings. The Spindle, the Shuttle, and the Needle. There was once a girl whose father and mother died while she was still a little child. All alone in a small house at the end of the village dwelt her godmother, who supported herself by spinning, weaving, and sewing. The old woman took the forlorn child to live with her, kept her to her work, and educated her in all that is good. When the girl was 15 years old, the old woman became ill, called the child to her bedside, and said, "Dear daughter, I feel my end drawing near. I leave thee the little house, which will protect thee from wind and weather, and my spindle, shuttle, and needle, with which thou canst earn thy bread." Then she laid her hands on the girl's head, blessed her, and said, "Only preserve the love of God in thy heart, and all will go well with thee." Thereupon she closed her eyes, and when she was laid in the earth, the maiden followed the coffin, weeping bitterly, and paid her the last mark of respect. And now the maiden lived quite alone in the little house, and was industrious, and span, wove, and sewed, and the blessing of the good old woman was on all that she did. It seemed as if the flax in the room increased of its own accord, and whenever she wove a piece of cloth or carpet, or had made a shirt, she at once found a buyer who paid her amply for it, so that she was in want of nothing, and even had something to share with others. About this time, the son of the king was traveling about the country looking for a bride. He was not to choose a poor one, and did not want to have a rich one. So he said, "She shall be my wife, who is the poorest and at the same time the richest." When he came to the village where the maiden dwelt, he inquired, as he did wherever he went, who was the richest and also the poorest girl in the place. They first named the richest. The poorest, they said, was the girl who lived in the small house quite at the end of the village. The rich girl was sitting in all her splendor before the door of her house, and when the prince approached her, she got up, went to meet him, and made him a low curtsy. He looked at her, said nothing, and rode on. When he came to the house of the poor girl, she was not standing at the door, but sitting in her little room. He stopped his horse and saw through the window, on which the bright sun was shining, the girl sitting at her spinning wheel, busily spinning. She looked up, and when she saw that the prince was looking in, she blushed all over her face, let her eyes fall, and went on spinning. I do not know whether just at that moment the thread was quite even, but she went on spinning until the king's son had ridden away again. Then she went to the window, opened it, and said, "It is so warm in this room." But she still looked after him as long as she could distinguish the white feathers in his hat. Then she sat down to work again in her own room, and went on with her spinning, and a saying which the old woman had often repeated when she was sitting at her work came into her mind, and she sang these words to herself: "Spindle, my spindle, haste, haste thee away, and here to my house bring the wooer, I pray." And what do you think happened? The spindle sprang out of her hand in an instant and out of the door. And when in her astonishment she got up and looked after it, she saw that it was dancing out merrily into the open country and drawing a shining golden thread after it. Before long, it had entirely vanished from her sight. As she had now no spindle, the girl took the weaver's shuttle in her hand, sat down to her loom, and began to weave. The spindle, however, danced continually onwards, and just as the thread came to an end, reached the prince. "What do I see?" he cried. "The spindle certainly wants to show me the way," turned his horse about, and rode back with the golden thread. The girl was, however, sitting at her work, singing, "Shuttle, my shuttle, weave well this day, and guide the wooer to me, I pray." Immediately the shuttle sprang out of her hand and out by the door. Before the threshold, however, it began to weave a carpet which was more beautiful than the eyes of man had ever yet beheld. Lilies and roses blossomed on both sides of it, and on a golden ground in the center, green branches ascended under which bounded hares and rabbits. Stags and deer stretched their heads in between them. Brightly colored birds were sitting in the branches above. They lacked nothing but the gift of song. The shuttle leapt hither and thither, and everything seemed to grow of its own accord. As the shuttle had run away, the girl sat down to sew. She held the needle in her hand and sang, "Needle, my needle, sharp-pointed and fine, prepare for a wooer, this house of mine." Then the needle leapt out of her fingers and flew everywhere about the room as quick as lightning. It was just as if invisible spirits were working. They covered tables and benches with green cloth in an instant, and the chairs with velvet, and hung the windows with silken curtains. Hardly had the needle put in the last stitch than the maiden saw through the window the white feathers of the prince whom the spindle had brought thither by the golden thread. He alighted, stepped over the carpet into the house, and when he entered the room, there stood the maiden in her poor garments, but she shone out from within them like a rose surrounded by leaves. "Thou art the poorest, and also the richest," said he to her. "Come with me, thou shalt be my bride." She did not speak, but she gave him her hand. Then he gave her a kiss, led her forth, lifted her onto his horse, and took her to the royal castle, where the wedding was solemnized with great rejoicings. The spindle, shuttle, and needle were preserved in the treasure chamber and held in great honor. Maid Maleen. There was once a king who had a son who asked in marriage the daughter of a mighty king. She was called Maid Maleen and was very beautiful. As her father wished to give her to another, the prince was rejected. But as they both loved each other with all their hearts, they would not give each other up. And Maid Maleen said to her father, "I can and will take no other for my husband." Then the king flew into a passion and ordered a dark tower to be built into which no ray of sunlight or moonlight should enter. When it was finished, he said, "Therein shalt thou be imprisoned for 7 years, and then I will come and see if thy perverse spirit is broken." Meat and drink for the 7 years were carried into the tower, and then she and her waiting woman were led into it and walled up, and thus cut off from the sky and from the earth. There they sat in the darkness and knew not when day or night began. The king's son often went round and round the tower and called their names, but no sound from without pierced through the thick walls. What else could they do but lament and complain? Meanwhile, the time passed, and by the diminution of the food and drink, they knew that the 7 years were coming to an end. They thought the moment of their deliverance was come. But no stroke of the hammer was heard, no stone fell out of the wall, and it seemed to Maid Maleen that her father had forgotten her. As they only had food for a short time longer, and saw a miserable death awaiting them, Maid Maleen said, "We must try our last chance and see if we can break through the wall." She took the bread knife and picked and bored at the mortar of a stone, and when she was tired, the waiting maid took her turn. With great labor, they succeeded in getting out 1 stone, and then a second and a third. And when 3 days were over, the first ray of light fell on their darkness, and at last the opening was so large that they could look out. The sky was blue, and a fresh breeze played on their faces, but how melancholy everything looked all around. Her father's castle lay in ruins. The town and the villages were so far as could be seen destroyed by fire, the fields far and wide laid to waste, and no human being was visible. When the opening in the wall was large enough for them to slip through, the waiting maid sprang down first, and then Maid Maleen followed. But where were they to go? The enemy had ravaged the whole kingdom, driven away the king, and slain all the inhabitants. They wandered forth to seek another country, but nowhere did they find a shelter or a human being to give them a mouthful of bread, and their need was so great that they were forced to appease their hunger with nettles. When after long journeying they came into another country, they tried to get work everywhere, but wherever they knocked, they were turned away, and no one would have pity on them. At last, they arrived in a large city and went to the royal palace. There also they were ordered to go away, but at last the cook said that they might stay in the kitchen and be scullions. The son of the king, in whose kingdom they were, was, however, the very man who had been betrothed to Maid Maleen. His father had chosen another bride for him whose face was as ugly as her heart was wicked. The wedding was fixed and the maiden had already arrived. But because of her great ugliness, however, she shut herself in her room and allowed no one to see her. And Maid Maleen had to take her meals from the kitchen. When the day came for the bride and the bridegroom to go to church, she was ashamed of her ugliness and afraid that if she showed herself in the streets, she would be mocked and laughed at by the people. Then said she to Maid Maleen, "A great piece of luck has befallen thee. I have sprained my foot and cannot well walk through the streets. Thou shalt put on my wedding clothes and take my place. A greater honor than that thou canst not have." Maid Maleen, however, refused it, and said, "I wish for no honor which is not suitable for me." It was in vain, too, that the bride offered her gold. At last she said angrily, "If thou dost not obey me, it shall cost thee thy life. I have but to speak the word, and thy head will lie at thy feet." Then she was forced to obey and put on the bride's magnificent clothes and all her jewels. When she entered the royal hall, everyone was amazed at her great beauty, and the king said to his son, "This is the bride whom I have chosen for thee, and whom thou must lead to church." The bridegroom was astonished and thought, "She is like my Maid Maleen, and I should believe that it was she herself. But she has long been shut up in the tower, or dead." He took her by the hand and led her to church. On the way was a nettle plant, and she said, "O nettle plant, little nettle plant, what dost thou here alone? I have known the time when I ate thee unboiled, when I ate thee unroasted." "What art thou saying?" asked the king's son. "Nothing," she replied. "I was only thinking of Maid Maleen." He was surprised that she knew about her, but kept silence. When they came to the footplank into the churchyard, she said, "Footbridge, do not break. I am not the true bride." "What art thou saying there?" asked the king's son. "Nothing," she replied. "I was only thinking of Maid Maleen." "Dost thou know Maid Maleen?" "No," she answered. "How should I know her? I have only heard of her." When they came to the church door, she said once more, "Church door, break not, I am not the true bride." "What art thou saying there?" asked he. "Ah," she answered, "I was only thinking of Maid Maleen." Then he took out a precious chain, put it round her neck, and fastened the clasp. Thereupon they entered the church, and the priest joined their hands together before the altar and married them. He led her home, but she did not speak a single word the whole way. When they got back to the royal palace, she hurried into the bride's chamber, put off the magnificent clothes and the jewels, dressed herself in her gray gown, and kept nothing but the jewel on her neck, which she had received from the bridegroom. When the night came, and the bride was to be led into the prince's apartment, she let her veil fall over her face, that he might not observe the deception. As soon as everyone had gone away, he said to her, "What didst thou say to the nettle plant which was growing by the wayside?" To which nettle plant asked she, "I don't talk to nettle plants." "If thou didst not do it, then thou art not the true bride," said he. So she bethought herself and said, "I must go out unto my maid, who keeps my thoughts for me." She went out and sought Maid Maleen. "Girl, what hast thou been saying to the nettle?" "I said nothing but, 'O nettle plant, little nettle plant, what dost thou here alone? I have known the time when I ate thee unboiled, when I ate thee unroasted." The bride ran back into the chamber and said, "I know now what I said to the nettle." And she repeated the words which she had just heard. "But what didst thou say to the footbridge when we went over it?" asked the king's son. "To the footbridge?" she answered. "I don't talk to footbridges." "Then thou art not the true bride." She again said, "I must go out unto my maid, who keeps my thoughts for me," and ran out and found Maid Maleen. "Girl, what didst thou say to the footbridge?" "I said nothing but, 'Footbridge, do not break, I am not the true bride.'" "That costs thee thy life," cried the bride, but she hurried into the room and said, "I know now what I said to the footbridge." And she repeated the words. "But what didst thou say to the church door?" "To the church door," she replied. "I don't talk to church doors." "Then thou art not the true bride." She went out and found Maid Maleen and said, "Girl, what didst thou say to the church door?" "I said nothing but, 'Church door break, not I am not the true bride.'" "That will break thy neck for thee," cried the bride, and flew into a terrible passion. But she hastened back into the room and said, "I know now what I said to the church door." And she repeated the words, "But where hast thou the jewel which I gave thee at the church door?" "What jewel?" she answered. "Thou didst not give me any jewel. I myself put it round thy neck, and I myself fastened it. If thou dost not know that thou art not the true bride." He drew the veil from her face, and when he saw her immeasurable ugliness, he sprang back terrified and said, "How comest thou here? Who art thou?" "I am thy betrothed bride, but because I feared lest the people should mock me when they saw me out of doors, I commanded the scullery maid to dress herself in my clothes and to go to church instead of me." "Where is the girl?" said he. "I want to see her. Go and bring her here." She went out and told the servants that the scullery maid was an impostor, and that they must take her out into the courtyard and strike off her head. The servants laid hold of Maid Maleen and wanted to drag her out, but she screamed so loudly for help that the king's son heard her voice hurried out of his chamber and ordered them to set the maiden free instantly. Lights were brought, and then he saw on her neck the gold chain which he had given her at the church door. "Thou art the true bride," said he who went with me to the church. "Come with me now to my room." When they were both alone, he said, "On the way to church thou didst name Maid Maleen, who was my betrothed bride. If I could believe it possible, I should think she was standing before me. Thou art like her in every respect." She answered, "I am Maid Maleen." who for thy sake was imprisoned 7 years in the darkness, who suffered hunger and thirst and has lived so long in want and poverty? Today, however, the sun is shining on me once more. I was married to thee in the church, and I am thy lawful wife." Then they kissed each other and were happy all the days of their lives. The false bride was rewarded for what she had done by having her head cut off. The tower in which Maid Maleen had been imprisoned remained standing for a long time, and when the children passed by it, they sang, "Cling, clang, Gloria, who sits within this tower. A king's daughter, she sits within a sight of her. I cannot win the wall, it will not break, the stone cannot be pierced. Little Hans, with your coat so gay, follow me fast as you may." The Willow-Wren and the Bear. Once in summertime, the bear and the wolf were walking in the forest, and the bear heard a bird singing so beautifully that he said, "Brother Wolf, what bird is it that sings so well?" "That is the king of birds," said the wolf, "before whom we must bow down." It was, however, in reality, the Willow-Wren König. "If that's the case," said the bear, "I should very much like to see his royal palace. Come take me thither." "That is not done quite as you seem to think," said the wolf. "You must wait until the queen comes." Soon afterwards, the queen arrived with some food in her beak, and the Lord King came too, and they began to feed their young ones. The bear would have liked to go at once, but the wolf held him back by the sleeve and said, "No, you must wait until the Lord and Lady Queen have gone away again." So they observed the hole in which was the nest and trotted away. The bear, however, could not rest until he had seen the royal palace, and when a short time had passed again, went to it. The king and queen had just flown out, so he peeped in and saw 5 or 6 young ones lying in it. "Is that the royal palace?" cried the bear. "It is a wretched palace, and you are not king's children. You are disreputable children." When the young wrens heard that, they were frightfully angry and screamed, "No, that we are not. Our parents are honest people. Bear, thou wilt have to pay for that." The bear and the wolf grew uneasy and turned back and went into their holes. The young willow wrens, however, continued to cry and scream, and when their parents again brought food, they said, "We will not so much as touch one fly's leg. No, not if we were dying of hunger, until you have settled whether we are respectable children or not. The bear has been here and has insulted us." Then the old king said, "Be easy, he shall be punished." And he at once flew with the queen to the bear's cave and called in Old Growler. "Why hast thou insulted my children? Thou shalt suffer for it. We will punish thee by a bloody war." Thus war was announced to the bear, and all 4-footed animals were summoned to take part in it: oxen, asses, cows, deer, and every other animal the earth contained. And the willow-wren summoned everything which flew in the air, not only birds large and small, but midges and hornets, bees and flies had to come. When the time came for the war to begin, the willow-wren sent out spies to discover who was the enemy's commander-in-chief. The gnat, who was the most crafty, flew into the forest where the enemy was assembled and hid herself beneath a leaf of the tree where the watchword was to be given. There stood the bear, and he called the fox before him and said, "Fox, thou art the most cunning of all animals. Thou shalt be general and lead us." "Good," said the fox, "but what signal shall we agree upon?" No one knew that. So the fox said, "I have a fine long bushy tail which almost looks like a plume of red feathers. When I lift my tail up quite high, all is going well, and you must charge. But if I let it hang down, run away as fast as you can." When the gnat had heard that, she flew away again and revealed everything with the greatest minuteness to the willow-wren. When day broke and the battle was to begin, all the four-footed animals came running up with such a noise that the earth trembled. The willow-wren also came flying through the air with his army with such a humming and whirring and swarming that everyone was uneasy and afraid, and on both sides they advanced against each other. But the willow-wren sent down the hornet with orders to get beneath the fox's tail and sting with all his might. When the fox felt the first sting, he started so that he drew up one leg with the pain, but he bore it and still kept his tail high in the air. At the second sting, he was forced to put it down for a moment. At the third, he could hold out no longer and screamed out and put his tail between his legs. When the animals saw that, they thought all was lost and began to fly each into his hole, and the birds had won the battle. Then the king and queen flew home to their children and cried, "Children, rejoice, eat, and drink to your heart's content. We have won the battle." But the young wren said, "We will not eat. Yet the bear must come to the nest and beg for pardon, and say that we are honorable children before we will do that." Then the willow-wren flew to the bear's hole and cried, "Growler, thou art to come to the nest to my children and beg their pardon, or else every rib of thy body shall be broken." So the bear crept thither in the greatest fear and begged their pardon. And now at last the young wrens were satisfied and sat down together and ate and drank and made merry till quite late into the night. Lean Lisa. Lean Lisa was of a very different way of thinking from lazy Harry and fat Trina, who never let anything disturb their peace. She scoured everything with ashes from morning till evening, and burdened her husband Long Lawrence with so much work that he had heavier weights to carry than an ass with 3 sacks. It was, however, all to no purpose. They had nothing and came to nothing. One night, as she lay in bed and could hardly move one limb for weariness, she still did not allow her thoughts to go to sleep. She thrust her elbows into her husband's side and said, "Listen, Lens, to what I have been thinking. If I were to find 1 florin and one was given to me, I would borrow another to put to them, and thou too shouldst give me another, and then as soon as I had got the 4 florins together, I would buy a young cow." This pleased the husband right well. "It is true," said he, "that I do not know where I am to get the florin which thou wantest as a gift from me, but if thou canst get the money together and canst buy a cow with it, thou wilt do well to carry out thy project. I shall be glad," he added, "if the cow has a calf, and then I shall often get a drink of milk to refresh me." "The milk is not for thee," said the woman. "We must let the calf suck that it may become big and fat, and we may be able to sell it well." "Certainly," replied the man, "but still we will take a little milk. That will do no harm." "Who has taught thee to manage cows?" said the woman. "Whether it does harm or not, I will not allow it. And even if thou wert to stand on thy head for it, thou shouldst not have a drop of the milk, dost thou think? Because there is no satisfying thee, Long Lawrence, that thou art to eat up what I earn with so much difficulty." "Wife," said the man, "be quiet, or I will give thee a blow on thy mouth." "What?" cried she. "Thou threatenest me, thou glutton, thou rascal, thou lazy Harry. She was just laying hold of his hair. But Lawrence got up, seized both lean Lisa's withered arms in one hand, and with the other he pressed down her head into the pillow, let her scold, and held her until she fell asleep for very weariness. Whether she continued to wrangle when she awoke next morning, or whether she went out to look for the florin which she wanted to find, that I know not. The ear of corn. In former times, when God himself still walked the earth, the fruitfulness of the soil was much greater than it is now. Then the ears of corn did not bear 50 or 60, but 400 or 500-fold. Then the corn grew from the bottom to the very top of the stalk, and according to the length of the stalk was the length of the ear. Men, however, are so made that when they are too well off, they no longer value the blessings which come from God, but grow indifferent and careless. One day, a woman was passing by a cornfield when her little child, who was running beside her, fell into a puddle and dirtied her frock. On this, the mother tore up a handful of the beautiful ears of corn and cleaned the frock with them. When the Lord, who just then came by, saw that he was angry, and said, "Henceforth shall the stalks of corn bear no more ears. Men are no longer worthy of heavenly gifts." The bystanders who heard this were terrified and fell on their knees and prayed that he would still leave something on the stalks, even if the people were undeserving of it, for the sake of the innocent birds which would otherwise have to starve. The Lord, who foresaw their suffering, had pity on them and granted the request. So the ears were left as they now grow. The Lambkin and the Little Fish. There were once a little brother and a little sister who loved each other with all their hearts. Their own mother was, however, dead, and they had a stepmother who was not kind to them and secretly did everything she could to hurt them. It so happened that the two were playing with other children in a meadow before the house, and there was a pond in the meadow, which came up to one side of the house. The children ran about it and caught each other and played at counting out. "Eneke beneke let me live, and I to thee my bird will give. The little bird its straw shall seek the straw I'll give to the cow to eat. The pretty cow shall give me milk, the milk I'll to the baker take. The baker, he shall bake a cake, the cake I'll give unto the cat shall catch some mice for that. The mice I'll hang up in the smoke, and then you'll see the snow." They stood in a circle while they played this, and the one to whom the word snow fell had to run away, and all the others ran after him and caught him. As they were running about so merrily, the stepmother watched them from the window and grew angry. And as she understood arts of witchcraft, she bewitched them both and changed the little brother into a fish and the little sister into a lamb. Then the fish swam here and there about the pond and was very sad, and the lambkin walked up and down the meadow and was miserable and could not eat or touch one blade of grass. Thus passed a long time, and then strangers came as visitors to the castle. The false stepmother thought, "This is a good opportunity," and called the cook and said to him, "Go and fetch the lamb from the meadow and kill it. We have nothing else for the visitors." Then the cook went away and got the lamb and took it into the kitchen and tied its feet, and all this it bore patiently. When he had drawn out his knife and was whetting it on the doorstep to kill the lamb, he noticed a little fish swimming backwards and forwards in the water in front of the kitchen sink and looking up at him. This, however, was the brother, for when the fish saw the cook take the lamb away, it followed them and swam along the pond to the house. Then the lamb cried down to it, "Ah, brother in the pond so deep, how sad is my poor heart. Even now the cook, he whets his knife to take away my tender life." The little fish answered, "Ah, little sister up on high, how sad is my poor heart, while in this pond I lie." When the cook heard that the lambkin could speak and said such sad words to the fish down below, he was terrified and thought this could be no common lamb, but must be bewitched by the wicked woman in the house. Then said he, "Be easy, I will not kill thee," and took another sheep and made it ready for the guests, and conveyed the lambkin to a good peasant woman, to whom he related all that he had seen and heard. The peasant was, however, the very woman who had been foster mother to the little sister, and she suspected at once who the lamb was, and went with it to a wise woman. Then the wise woman pronounced a blessing over the lambkin and the little fish, by means of which they regained their human forms. And after this, she took them both into a little hut in a great forest, where they lived alone, but were contented and happy. Little Red Riding Hood. Once upon a time, there was a sweet little girl. Everyone who saw her liked her, but most of all her grandmother, who did not know what to give the child next. Once she gave her a little cap made of red velvet, because it suited her so well, and she wanted to wear it all the time. She came to be known as Little Red Riding Hood. One day, her mother said to her, "Come, Little Red Riding Hood, here is a piece of cake and a bottle of wine. Take them to your grandmother. She is sick and weak, and they will do her well. Mind your manners and give her my greetings. Behave yourself on the way, and do not leave the path, or you might fall down and break the glass. And then there will be nothing for your sick grandmother." Little Red Riding Hood promised to obey her mother. The grandmother lived out in the woods a half hour from the village. When Little Red Riding Hood entered the woods, a wolf came up to her. She did not know what a wicked animal he was, and was not afraid of him. "Good day to you, Little Red Riding Hood." "Thank you, Wolf. Where are you going so early?" "Little Red Riding Hood, to grandmother's." "And what are you carrying under your apron?" "Grandmother is sick and weak, and I am taking her some cake and wine. We baked yesterday, and they should give her strength." "Little Red Riding Hood, just where does your grandmother live?" "Her house is a good quarter hour from here in the woods, under the 3 large oak trees. There's a hedge of hazel bushes there. You must know the place," said Little Red Riding Hood. The wolf thought to himself, "Now there is a tasty bite for me. Just how are you going to catch her?" Then he said, "Listen, Little Red Riding Hood, haven't you seen the beautiful flowers that are blossoming in the woods? Why don't you go and take a look? And I don't believe you can hear how beautifully the birds are singing. You are walking along as though you were on your way to school in the village. It is very beautiful in the woods." Little Red Riding Hood opened her eyes and saw the sunlight breaking through the trees, and how the ground was covered with beautiful flowers. She thought, "If I take a bouquet to grandmother, she will be very pleased. Anyway, it is still early, and I'll be home on time." And she ran off into the woods looking for flowers. Each time she picked one, she thought that she could see an even more beautiful one a little way off, and she ran after it, going further and further into the woods. But the wolf ran straight to the grandmother's house and knocked on the door. "Who's there?" "Little Red Riding Hood. I'm bringing you some cake and wine. Open the door for me." "Just press the latch," called out the grandmother. "I'm too weak to get up." The wolf pressed the latch and the door opened. He stepped inside, went straight to the grandmother's bed, and ate her up. Then he took her clothes, put them on, and put her cap on his head. He got into her bed and pulled the curtains shut. Little Red Riding Hood had run after flowers and did not continue on her way to grandmother's until she had gathered all that she could carry. When she arrived, she found to her surprise that the door was open. She walked into the parlor, and everything looked so strange that she thought, "Oh my God, why am I so afraid? I usually like it at grandmother's." Then she went to the bed and pulled back the curtains. Grandmother was lying there with her cap pulled down over her face and looking very strange. "Oh, grandmother, what big ears you have, all the better to hear you with. Oh, grandmother, what big eyes you have, all the better to see you with. Oh, grandmother, what big hands you have, all the better to grab you with. Oh, grandmother, what a horribly big mouth you have, all the better to eat you with." And with that he jumped out of bed, jumped on top of poor Little Red Riding Hood, and ate her up. As soon as the wolf had finished this tasty bite, he climbed back into bed, fell asleep, and began to snore very loudly. A huntsman was just passing by. He thought it strange that the old woman was snoring so loudly, so he decided to take a look. He stepped inside, and in the bed there lay the wolf that he had been hunting for such a long time. "He has eaten the grandmother, but perhaps she still can be saved. I won't shoot him," thought the huntsman. So he took a pair of scissors and cut open his belly. He had cut only a few strokes when he saw the red cap shining through. He cut a little more, and the girl jumped out and cried, "Oh, I was so frightened. It was so dark inside the wolf's body." And then the grandmother came out alive as well. Then Little Red Riding Hood fetched some large, heavy stones. They filled the wolf's body with them, and when he woke up and tried to run away, the stones were so heavy that he fell down dead. The three of them were happy. The huntsman took the wolf's pelt. The grandmother ate the cake and drank the wine that Little Red Riding Hood had brought. And Little Red Riding Hood thought to herself, "As long as I live, I will never leave the path and run off into the woods by myself if Mother tells me not to." They also tell how Little Red Riding Hood was taking some baked things to her grandmother another time when another wolf spoke to her and wanted her to leave the path. But Little Red Riding Hood took care and went straight to grandmother's. She told her that she had seen the wolf and that he had wished her a good day, but had stared at her in a wicked manner. "If we hadn't been on a public road, he would have eaten me up," she said. "Come," said the grandmother, "let's lock the door so he can't get in." Soon afterward, the wolf knocked on the door and called out, "Open up, grandmother. It's Little Red Riding Hood, and I'm bringing you some baked things." They remained silent and did not open the door. The wicked one walked around the house several times and finally jumped onto the roof. He wanted to wait until Little Red Riding Hood went home that evening, then follow her and eat her up in the darkness. But the grandmother saw what he was up to. There was a large stone trough in front of the house. "Fetch a bucket, Little Red Riding Hood," she said. "Yesterday I cooked some sausage. Carry the water that I boiled them with to the trough." Little Red Riding Hood carried water until the large trough was clear full. The smell of sausage arose into the wolf's nose. He sniffed and looked down, stretching his neck so long that he could no longer hold himself, and he began to slide. He slid off the roof, fell into the trough, and drowned. And Little Red Riding Hood returned home happily and safely. The Bittern and the Hoopoe. "Where do you like best to feed your flocks?" said a man to an old cowherd. "Here, sir, where the grass is neither too rich nor too poor, or else it is no use." "Why not?" asked the man. "Do you hear that melancholy cry from the meadow there?" answered the shepherd. "That is the Bittern. He was once a shepherd, and so was the Hoopoe also. I will tell you the story. The Bittern pastured his flocks on rich green meadows where flowers grew in abundance, so his cows became wild and unmanageable. The Hoopoe drove his cattle onto high barren hills where the wind plays with the sand, and his cows became thin and got no strength. When it was evening, and the shepherds wanted to drive their cows homewards, the Bittern could not get his together again. They were too high-spirited and ran away from him. He called, "Come, cows, come!" but it was of no use. They took no notice of his calling. The Hoopoe, however, could not even get his cows up on their legs, so faint and weak had they become. "Up, up, up!" screamed he, but it was in vain. They remained lying on the sand. That is the way when one has no moderation. And to this day, though, they have no flocks now to watch, the Bittern cries, "Come, cows, come," and the Hoopoe, "Up, up, up." Death's messengers. In ancient times, a giant was once traveling on a great highway when suddenly an unknown man sprang up before him and said, "Halt, not one step farther." "What?" cried the giant. "A creature whom I can crush between my fingers wants to block my way. Who art thou that thou darest to speak so boldly?" "I am Death," answered the other. "No one resists me, and thou also must obey my commands." But the giant refused and began to struggle with Death. It was a long, violent battle. At last the giant got the upper hand and struck Death down with his fist so that he dropped by a stone. The giant went his way, and Death lay there conquered and so weak that he could not get up again. "What will be done now?" said he. "If I stay lying here in a corner, no one will die in the world, and it will get so full of people that they won't have room to stand beside each other." In the meantime, a young man came along the road who was strong and healthy, singing a song and glancing around on every side. When he saw the half-fainting one, he went compassionately to him, raised him up, poured a strengthening draught out of his flask for him, and waited till he came round. "Dost thou know," said the stranger, whilst he was getting up, "who I am and who it is whom thou hast helped on his legs again?" "No," answered the youth, "I do not know thee." "I am Death," said he. "I spare no one, and can make no exception with thee, but that thou mayest see that I am grateful. I promise thee that I will not fall on thee unexpectedly, but will send my messengers to thee before I come and take thee away." "Well," said the youth, "it is something gained that I shall know when thou comest, and at any rate be safe from thee for so long." Then he went on his way and was light-hearted and enjoyed himself and lived without thought. But youth and health did not last long. Soon came sicknesses and sorrows, which tormented him by day and took away his rest by night. "Die I shall not," said he to himself, "for Death will send his messengers before that, but I do wish these wretched days of sickness were over." As soon as he felt himself well again, he began once more to live merrily. Then one day, someone tapped him on the shoulder. He looked round, and Death stood behind him and said, "Follow me, the hour of thy departure from this world has come." "What?" replied the man. "Wilt thou break thy word? Didst thou not promise me that thou wouldst send thy messengers to me before coming thyself? I have seen none." "Silence," answered Death. "Have I not sent one messenger to thee after another? Did not fever come and smite thee and shake thee and cast thee down? Has dizziness not bewildered thy head? Has not gout twitched thee in all thy limbs? Did not thine ears sing? Did not toothache bite into thy cheeks? Was it not dark before thine eyes? And besides all that, has not my own brother Sleep reminded thee every night of me? Didst thou not lie by night as if thou wert already dead?" The man could make no answer. He yielded to his fate and went away with Death. The Tailor in Heaven. One very fine day it came to pass that the good God wished to enjoy himself in the heavenly garden, and took all the apostles and saints with him, so that no one stayed in heaven but St. Peter. The Lord had commanded him to let no one in during his absence, so Peter stood by the door and kept watch. Before long, someone knocked. Peter asked who was there and what he wanted. "I am a poor, honest tailor who prays for admission," replied a smooth voice. "Honest indeed," said Peter. "Like the thief on the gallows, thou hast been light-fingered and hast snipped folks' clothes away. Thou wilt not get into heaven. The Lord hath forbidden me to let anyone in while he is out." "Come, do be merciful," cried the tailor. "Little scraps which fall off the table of their own accord are not stolen and are not worth speaking about. Look, I am lame and have blisters on my feet. With walking here, I cannot possibly turn back again. Only let me in, and I will do all the rough work. I will carry the children and wash their clothes, and wash and clean the benches on which they have been playing, and patch all their torn clothes." St. Peter let himself be moved by pity, and opened the door of heaven just wide enough for the lame tailor to slip his lean body in. He was forced to sit down in a corner behind the door, and was to stay quietly and peaceably there, in order that the Lord, when he returned, might not observe him and be angry. The tailor obeyed, but once when St. Peter went outside the door, he got up, and full of curiosity, went round about into every corner of heaven, and inspected the arrangement of every place. At length he came to a spot where many beautiful and delightful chairs were standing, and in the midst was a seat all of gold, which was set with shining jewels. Likewise, it was much higher than the other chairs, and a footstool of gold was before it. It was, however, the seat on which the Lord sat when he was at home, and from which he could see everything which happened on earth. The tailor stood still and looked at the seat for a long time, for it pleased him better than all else. At last he could master his curiosity no longer, and climbed up and seated himself in the chair. Then he saw everything which was happening on earth, and observed an ugly old woman who was standing washing by the side of a stream, secretly laying 2 veils on one side for herself. The sight of this made the tailor so angry that he laid hold of the golden footstool and threw it down to earth through heaven at the old thief. As, however, he could not bring the stool back again, he slipped quietly out of the chair, seated himself in his place behind the door, and behaved as if he had never stirred from the spot. When the Lord and Master came back again with his heavenly companions, he did not see the tailor behind the door, but when he seated himself on his chair, the footstool was missing. He asked St. Peter what had become of the stool, but he did not know. Then he asked if he had let anyone come in. "I know of no one who has been here," answered Peter, "but a lame tailor who is still sitting behind the door." Then the Lord had the tailor brought before him and asked him if he had taken away the stool and where he had put it. "Oh, Lord," answered the tailor joyously, "I threw it in my anger down to earth at an old woman whom I saw stealing 2 veils at the washing." "O thou knave," said the Lord, "were I to judge as thou judgest, how dost thou think thou couldst have escaped so long? I should long ago have had no chairs, benches, seats, nay, not even an oven fork, but should have thrown everything down at the sinners. Henceforth thou canst stay no longer in heaven, but must go outside the door again. Then go where thou wilt. No one shall give punishment here, but I alone, the Lord." Peter was obliged to take the tailor out of heaven again, and as he had torn shoes and feet, covered with blisters, he took a stick in his hand and went to "Wait a bit," where the good soldiers sit and make merry. 1 Eye, 2 Eyes, and 3 Eyes. There was once a woman who had 3 daughters, the eldest of whom was called 1 Eye, because she had only 1 eye in the middle of her forehead, and the second 2 eyes, because she had 2 eyes like other folks, and the youngest 3 eyes because she had 3 eyes, and her 3rd eye was also in the center of her forehead. However, as 2 Eyes saw just as other human beings did, her sisters and her mother could not endure her. They said to her, "Thou with thy 2 eyes art no better than the common people. Thou dost not belong to us." They pushed her about and threw old clothes to her and gave her nothing to eat but what they left, and did everything that they could to make her unhappy. It came to pass that 2 Eyes had to go out into the fields and tend the goat, but she was still quite hungry, because her sisters had given her so little to eat. So she sat down on a ridge and began to weep, and so bitterly that 2 streams ran down from her eyes. And once, when she looked up in her grief, a woman was standing beside her who said, "Why art thou weeping, little 2 Eyes?" 2 Eyes answered, "Have I not reason to weep when I have 2 eyes like other people, and my sisters and mother hate me for it, and push me from one corner to another, throw old clothes at me, and give me nothing to eat? But the scraps they leave today, they have given me so little that I am still quite hungry." Then the wise woman said, "Wipe away thy tears, 2 Eyes, and I will tell thee something to stop thee ever suffering from hunger again. Just say to thy goat, 'Bleat, my little goat, bleat, cover the table with something to eat.' And then a clean, well-spread little table will stand before thee, with the most delicious food upon it, of which thou mayest eat as much as thou art inclined for. And when thou hast had enough and hast no more need of the little table, just say, 'Bleat, bleat, my little goat, I pray, and take the table quite away, and then it will vanish again from thy sight.'" Hereupon the wise woman departed, but 2 Eyes thought, "I must instantly make a trial and see if what she said is true, for I am far too hungry." And she said, "Bleat, my little goat, bleat, cover the table with something to eat." And scarcely had she spoken the words than a little table covered with a white cloth was standing there, and on it was a plate with a knife and fork and a silver spoon. And the most delicious food was there also, warm and smoking, as if it had just come out of the kitchen. Then 2 Eyes said the shortest prayer she knew, Lord God be with us always, amen, and helped herself to some food and enjoyed it. And when she was satisfied, she said, as the wise woman had taught her, Bleat, bleat, my little goat, I pray, and take the table quite away. And immediately the little table and everything on it was gone again. That is a delightful way of keeping house, thought Two Eyes, and was quite glad and happy. In the evening, when she went home with her goat, she found a small earthenware dish with some food which her sisters had set ready for her, but she did not touch it. Next day, she again went out with her goat and left the few bits of broken bread which had been handed to her lying untouched. The first and second time that she did this, her sisters did not remark it at all. But as it happened, every time they did observe it and said, There is something wrong about Two Eyes. She always leaves her food untasted, and she used to eat up everything that was given her. She must have discovered other ways of getting food. In order that they might learn the truth, they resolved to send One Eye with Two Eyes when she went to drive her goat to the pasture, to observe what Two Eyes did when she was there, and whether anyone brought her anything to eat and drink. So, when Two Eyes set out the next time, One Eye went to her and said, I will go with you to the pasture and see that the goat is well taken care of and driven where there is food. But Two Eyes knew what was in One Eye's mind, and drove the goat into high grass and said, Come, One Eye, we will sit down, and I will sing something to you. One Eye sat down and was tired with the unaccustomed walk and the heat of the sun, and Two Eyes sang constantly, One eye wakest thou, one eye sleepest thou, until One Eye shut her one eye and fell asleep. And as soon as Two Eyes saw that One Eye was fast asleep and could discover nothing, she said, Bleat, my little goat, bleat, cover the table with something to eat, and seated herself at her table and ate and drank until she was satisfied. And then she again cried, Bleat, bleat, my little goat, I pray, and take the table quite away. And in an instant all was gone. Two Eyes now awakened One Eye and said, One Eye, you want to take care of the goat and go to sleep while you're doing it. And in the meantime, the goat might run all over the world. Come, let us go home again. So they went home, and again Two Eyes let her little dish stand untouched, and One Eye could not tell her mother why she would not eat it, and to excuse herself said, I fell asleep when I was out. Next day the mother said to Three Eyes, This time thou shalt go and observe if Two Eyes eats anything when she is out, and if anyone fetches her food and drink, for she must eat and drink in secret. So Three Eyes went to Two Eyes and said, I will go with you and see if the goat is taken proper care of and driven where there is food. But Two Eyes knew what was in Three Eyes' mind, and drove the goat into high grass and said, We will sit down, and I will sing something to you, Three Eyes. Three Eyes sat down and was tired with the walk and with the heat of the sun, and Two Eyes began the same song as before, and sang, Three Eyes, are you waking? But then instead of singing, Three Eyes, are you sleeping? As she ought to have done, she thoughtlessly sang, Two Eyes, are you sleeping? And sang all the time, Three Eyes, are you waking? Two Eyes, are you sleeping? Then two of the eyes, which Three Eyes had shut and fell asleep, but the third, as it had not been named in the song, did not sleep. It is true that Three Eyes shut it, but only in her cunning to pretend it was asleep too. But it blinked and could see everything very well. And when Two Eyes thought that Three Eyes was fast asleep, she used her little charm, "Bleat, my little goat, bleat, cover the table with something to eat," and ate and drank as much as her heart desired, and then ordered the table to go away again. "Bleat, bleat, my little goat, I pray, and take the table quite away." And Three Eyes had seen everything. Then Two Eyes came to her, waked her, and said, "Have you been asleep? Three Eyes, you are a good caretaker. Come, we will go home." And when they got home, Two Eyes again did not eat, and Three Eyes said to the mother, "Now I know why that high-minded thing there does not eat. When she is out, she says to the goat, 'Bleat, my little goat, bleat, cover the table with something to eat.' And then a little table appears before her, covered with the best of food, much better than any we have here. And when she has eaten all she wants, she says, 'Bleat, bleat, my little goat, I pray,' and take the table quite away, and all disappears. I watched everything closely. She put two of my eyes to sleep by using a certain form of words, but luckily the one in my forehead kept awake." Then the envious mother cried, "Dost thou want to fare better than we do? The desire shall pass away." And she fetched a butcher's knife and thrust it into the heart of the goat, which fell down dead. When Two Eyes saw that she went out full of trouble, seated herself on the ridge of grass at the edge of the field, and wept bitter tears. Suddenly the wise woman once more stood by her side and said, "Two Eyes, why art thou weeping?" "Have I not reason to weep?" she answered. "The goat which covered the table for me every day when I spoke your charm has been killed by my mother, and now I shall again have to bear hunger and want." The wise woman said, "Two Eyes, I will give thee a piece of good advice. Ask thy sisters to give thee the entrails of the slaughtered goat, and bury them in the ground in front of the house, and thy fortune will be made." Then she vanished, and Two Eyes went home and said to her sisters, "Dear sisters, do give me some part of my goat. I don't wish for what is good, but give me the entrails." Then they laughed and said, "If that's all you want, you can have it." So Two Eyes took the entrails and buried them quietly in the evening in front of the house door, as the wise woman had counseled her to do. Next morning, when they all awoke and went to the house door, there stood a strangely magnificent tree with leaves of silver and fruit of gold hanging among them, so that in all the wide world there was nothing more beautiful or precious. They did not know how the tree could have come there during the night, but Two Eyes saw that it had grown up out of the entrails of the goat, for it was standing on the exact spot where she had buried them. Then the mother said to One Eye, "Climb up, my child, and gather some of the fruit of the tree for us." One Eye climbed up, but when she was about to get hold of one of the golden apples, the branch escaped from her hands, and that happened each time, so that she could not pluck a single apple, let her do what she might. Then said the mother, "Three Eyes, do you climb up? You with your 3 eyes can look about you better than One Eye." One Eye slipped down, and 3 Eyes climbed up. 3 Eyes was not more skillful and might search as she liked, but the golden apples always escaped her. At length the mother grew impatient and climbed up herself, but could get hold of the fruit no better than One Eye and 3 Eyes, for she always clutched empty air. Then said 2 Eyes, "I will just go up. Perhaps I may succeed better." The sisters cried, "You indeed, with your 2 eyes, what can you do?" But 2 Eyes climbed up and the golden apples did get out of her way, but came into her hand of their own accord, so that she could pluck them one after the other, and brought a whole apronful down with her. The mother took them away from her, and instead of treating poor Two Eyes any better for this, she and One Eye and Three Eyes were only envious because Two Eyes alone had been able to get the fruit, and they treated her still more cruelly. It so befell that once, when they were all standing together by the tree, a young knight came up. "Quick, Two Eyes!" cried the two sisters. "Creep under this and don't disgrace us." And with all speed they turned an empty barrel, which was standing close by the tree over poor Two Eyes, and they pushed the golden apples which she had been gathering under it too. When the knight came nearer, he was a handsome lord who stopped and admired the magnificent gold and silver tree, and said to the two sisters, "To whom does this fine tree belong? Anyone who would bestow one branch of it on me might in return for it ask whatsoever he desired." Then One Eye and Three Eyes replied that the tree belonged to them, and that they would give him a branch. They both took great trouble, but they were not able to do it, for the branches and fruit both moved away from them every time. Then said the knight, "It is very strange that the tree should belong to you, and that you should still not be able to break a piece off." They again asserted that the tree was their property. Whilst they were saying so, Two Eyes rolled out a couple of golden apples from under the barrel to the feet of the knight, for she was vexed with One Eye and Three Eyes for not speaking the truth. When the knight saw the apples, he was astonished and asked where they came from. One Eye and Three Eyes answered that they had another sister who was not allowed to show herself, for she had only two eyes, like any common person. The knight, however, desired to see her, and cried, "Two Eyes, come forth!" Then Two Eyes, quite comforted, came from beneath the barrel, and the knight was surprised at her great beauty, and said, "Thou, Two Eyes, canst certainly break off a branch from the tree for me." "Yes," replied Two Eyes, "that I certainly shall be able to do, for the tree belongs to me." And she climbed up, and with the greatest ease broke off a branch with beautiful silver leaves and golden fruit, and gave it to the knight. Then said the knight, "Two Eyes, what shall I give thee for it?" "Alas," answered Two Eyes, "I suffer from hunger and thirst, grief, and want from early morning till late night. If you would take me with you and deliver me from these things, I should be happy." So the knight lifted Two Eyes onto his horse and took her home with him to his father's castle, and there he gave her beautiful clothes and meat and drink to her heart's content. And as he loved her so much, he married her, and the wedding was solemnized with great rejoicing. When Two Eyes was thus carried away by the handsome knight, her two sisters grudged her good fortune in downright earnest. The wonderful tree, however, still remains with us, thought they, and even if we can gather no fruit from it, still everyone will stand still and look at it, and come to us and admire it. Who knows what good things may be in store for us? But next morning the tree had vanished, and all their hopes were at an end. And when Two Eyes looked out of the window of her own little room, to her great delight, it was standing in front of it, and so it had followed her. Two Eyes lived a long time in happiness. Once two poor women came to her in her castle and begged for alms. She looked in their faces and recognized her sisters, One Eye and Three Eyes, who had fallen into such poverty that they had to wander about and beg their bread from door to door. Two Eyes, however, made them welcome and was kind to them and took care of them, so that they both with all their hearts repented the evil that they had done their sister in their youth.